When you finish a bottle of water and throw it away, it feels like the end of a very short story. You used it, it served its purpose, and now it's gone. But in reality, that moment is just the beginning of a much longer journey, one that can last for decades and travel across continents. To understand where a plastic bottle goes, you have to start before it even exists. Most plastic bottles are made from a material called PET, or polyethylene terephthalate. This material is derived from fossil fuels, primarily oil and natural gas. The process begins with extraction. Oil is drilled from underground reservoirs, transported to refineries, and then broken down into smaller chemical components. These components are used to create the building blocks of plastic. Through a series of industrial processes, they are turned into pellets, small, uniform pieces of raw plastic that can be melted and shaped into products. At this stage, the plastic bottle doesn't exist yet. It's just material, waiting to be formed. Manufacturers heat these pellets and mold them into preforms, which look like small test tubes. These preforms are then reheated and expanded using air pressure into the familiar shape of a bottle. The process is fast, efficient, and designed for mass production. After formed, the bottles are filled, sealed, labeled, and packaged. From there, they are transported, often over long distances, to warehouses, stores, and vending machines. By the time a bottle reaches a consumer, it may have already traveled hundreds or even thousands of miles. And then comes its shortest phase, use. For most people, a plastic bottle is used once, sometimes over the course of just a few minutes. After that, it becomes waste. What happens next depends on a series of decisions, some individual, some systemic. If the bottle is placed in a recycling bin, its journey takes one path. If it's grown into a regular trash bin, it takes another. And if it's littered or escapes waste systems altogether, it enters the environment directly. Let's follow each of these paths. In the best-case scenario, the bottle is properly recycled. It is collected along with other recyclables and transported to a sorting facility. There, machines and workers separate materials based on type, plastics, metals, paper, and so on. PET bottles are identified and sorted out. They are then cleaned to remove labels, caps, and any remaining liquid. After cleaning, the bottles are shredded into small flakes. These flakes can be melted and reprocessed into new products. In some cases, they are turned back into new bottles. More often, they are used to make fibers for clothing, carpets, or other materials. But recycling is not a perfect loop. Each time plastic is processed, its quality degrades. This means it can only be recycled a limited number of times before it becomes unusable. Eventually, even recycled plastic reaches the end of its life cycle. And not all bottles make it through this system. In many places, recycling rates are relatively low. Contamination, lack of infrastructure, and economic factors all play a role. If a bottle is not recycled, it usually ends up in a landfill or is incinerated. In a landfill, the bottle may remain intact for years. Buried under layers of waste, it's shielded from sunlight and physical stress. This slows down the breakdown process significantly. The bottle doesn't decompose in the traditional sense. Instead, it may slowly weaken and fragment over time. If the bottle is incinerated, its journey ends differently. Burning plastic reduces its volume, but it releases emissions into the atmosphere, including carbon dioxide and other pollutants. This shifts the impact from land to air rather than eliminating it. Then there is the third path, the one that receives the most attention, but is also the hardest to control. If a plastic bottle escapes waste management systems, it becomes part of the environment. This can happen in many ways. It might be dropped as litter, blown out of a trash bin, or carried by water during heavy rain. Once in the open, the bottle begins to move. Wind can carry lightweight plastic over long distances. Rain can wash it into storm drains, which often lead to rivers. From there, it can travel downstream, eventually reaching the ocean. This journey is not immediate. A bottle might spend time caught in vegetation, trapped along riverbanks, or buried in sediment. But over time, many of these barriers are temporary. Movement continues. When the bottle reaches the ocean, its path becomes even more complex. Ocean currents can carry it across vast distances. Some bottles remain near coastlines, while others are pulled into large circulating systems known as gyres. These gyres can trap floating debris, creating regions where plastic accumulates. But even here, the bottle does not remain unchanged. Exposure to sunlight, salt water, and wave action begins to break it down. The plastic becomes brittle, cracks form, pieces break off. Eventually, the bottle fragments into smaller and smaller pieces. These pieces become microplastics, tiny particles that are difficult to see but widely distributed. At this stage, the bottle as an object no longer exists, but the material remains. Microplastics behave differently from larger debris. They can be suspended in water, settle into sediments, or be ingested by marine organisms. Fish, shellfish, and even plankton can take in these particles, either directly or indirectly. Once inside an organism, plastic does not provide any nutritional value. It can accumulate, interfere with digestion, or carry chemicals into the body. As larger animals eat smaller ones, these particles can move up the food chain. This means that the material from a single bottle can eventually become part of a much larger system. And the journey doesn't stop in the ocean. Microplastics can be transported back onto land through various processes. Waves can deposit them on beaches, wind can carry them into the air, rain can bring them down in new locations. In some cases, they enter soil systems where they interact with plant roots and microorganisms. In others, they remain in the air, becoming part of the particles we breathe. This is one of the most important aspects of a plastic bottle's journey. It doesn't end in one place. It spreads, changes form, and continues to move through different environments. Even in places far from cities or industry, traces of plastic can be found. Remote regions, including mountains and deep ocean environments, are not isolated from this process. The reason is simple. Plastic is durable, mobile, and persistent. Another layer to consider is time. A plastic bottle can take hundreds of years to fully break down, and even then, it does not disappear completely. It becomes smaller and more dispersed, but it remains part of the environment. This long lifespan means that the bottles produced today will continue to exist long into the future. At the same time, new bottles are constantly being created. This creates an accumulation effect. Each year adds more plastic to the system while very little is removed. From a systems perspective, the journey of a plastic bottle is not a single path, but a network of possibilities. Some bottles are recycled, some are buried, some are burned, and some move through ecosystems in ways that are difficult to track. Understanding this journey changes how we think about waste. The idea of throwing something away suggests a final destination, but in reality, there is no true away. There are just different stages and locations within a larger system. A plastic bottle is not just an object, it is part of a process that begins with resource extraction and continues through production, use, and multiple forms of disposal or redistribution. Each stage has its own impacts on energy use, emissions, ecosystems, and human health. Addressing these impacts requires looking at the entire life cycle, not just the moment of disposal. Reducing the number of bottles produced is one approach. Improving recycling systems is another. Designing materials that are easier to reuse or safely break down could also make a difference. But each of these solutions comes with its own challenges. What remains consistent is the nature of the material itself. Plastic is designed to last. That is what makes it useful, but it is also what makes its journey so long and so difficult to manage. The next time you hold a plastic bottle, it may seem simple and temporary, but its story is neither. It has already traveled a long way to reach you, and once you let it go, its journey is far from over.